Mesdames et messieurs, ladies and gentlemen, veuillez accueillir, please welcome Dr. Martine Rothblatt en conversation avec, in conversation with Tom Standage.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here to talk about tomorrow. And I'm delighted that we're joined by Martine Rothblatt, who is eminently qualified. I'm just going to give you a very, very quick summary of her extraordinary career so that you can see exactly why she's such a great person to ask about what might be happening next. She's worked in a range of fields, from satellite communications, founding SiriusXM, to pharmaceuticals, founding United Therapeutics, which is also a multi-billion-dollar company now, to develop a rare disease a treatment for a rare disease that affected her daughter. She's also a lawyer, an advocate for transgender rights, and a pilot, and has pioneered the technology of electric helicopters, which I think we're going to get onto in a minute. And she's interested in transhumanism and the idea of mind uploading, and has created a robot called Binner 48, who's here at this event, I believe.
Yes.
Is that right? Yes, excellent. Based on 100 hours of recordings of her wife, who's also called Binner. So, Martine, I'm sure we could talk all day about the things you've done in the past, but that's not the focus of this event and why we're here. We want to talk about tomorrow. We're going to look forward and not back. So I really want to hear your perspectives as an entrepreneur who's repeatedly anticipated what's coming next, about what the future might look like. And in three areas in particular: climate, AI, and medicine. But before we get onto that, I'm also going to ask the audience what they think is the biggest challenge facing us. So in your app, in your Click app, there is a section in the menu called Slido. And what we'd like to do during this session is please tell us in one word, what is tomorrow's biggest challenge? Someone's put climate in already. We'll come back to this in a few minutes, but I'd really like to hear what you think the biggest challenge we face tomorrow is. But here we've got climate, so let's kick off with climate. So, Martine, what's your take on where we are with climate, what we could be doing, the role of technology in addressing this problem?
Thanks, Tom, and I, too, am very, very happy to be here. So my take on climate is it's the biggest challenge of our time and the biggest challenge for this century. I think that we need to do much, much more about it than we are doing right now, and I believe that technology can, in fact, get us there.
So are there specific technologies? Is it just about renewable power? There's people talking about building machines to suck carbon dioxide out of the air. There's talk of geoengineering, putting particles in the atmosphere to block out the sun. Is there a particular area you think we should focus on, or are we going to need a mixture of all of these things?
So the area that we in United Therapeutics have most focused on is in the area of buildings. Buildings are responsible for more than a third of the CO2 footprint. And we had heard that it wouldn't be possible to do anything about creating a zero carbon footprint for buildings until maybe 2040 or 2050, which of course would be way too late, and the oceans would be rising up above us by then, and there would be, I think, mass fatalities around the world, especially the people with less economic resources.
So hang on, this is interesting, because buildings, when you ask people what causes climate change, they say cars, airplanes, maybe they say agriculture.
I think buildings and infrastructure are the largest single source.
And people maybe don't know that. So it's what, a third buildings, a third transport, a third
something like
agriculture,
that.
Something
yes,
like that?
I think that's...
Okay, so what can we do about making... We kind of know with transport we need electric cars and things like that. What can we do with buildings?
Well, right now we can build all of our buildings to have a zero carbon footprint. And to prove that, we in United Therapeutics completed last year and inaugurated the world's largest zero carbon footprint building. It's a 150,000 square foot laboratory and office space that creates all of its heating, electrical, and cooling loads all right on the site of the building itself using geothermal exchange. It does this in the mid-Atlantic climate, and we did this in part to prove to everybody that you don't have to wait until 2030, 2040, 2050. If we adopted zoning laws today requiring all new construction to be zero carbon, it could be accomplished, and there goes a third of global warming out the window.
So this is basically a pharmaceutical company saying, we're still going to take a stand on climate. It's a responsibility when we build a new building to do this. I think most people would assume that a zero-carbon building, I think we've got some video of it as well,
Yes.
haven't we? So let's see it while we talk about it. I think most people would assume that this would mean like loads of solar panels and wind turbines. Tell me
Well,
about
you'll
this.
see the building in this video, which is playing someplace. But the key point is that, yes, we're a pharmaceutical company, but our attitude is sort of like, what sense is it to save everybody's lives with medicines if we
Right.
then lose everybody's lives in climate change?
Right.
So we feel it's responsibility of everybody to do all that we can to create a zero carbon footprint. It also happens to be the most intelligent building in the world, because to control all of these climate systems, you'll see it's not blanketed with ugly solar panels. It does have 1 megawatt of photovoltaics,
Right.
but they're blended into the window.
So tell us about the geothermal thing.
Yeah, so the
Because I don't think a lot
geothermal
of people have heard of that.
Yeah, geothermal involves using the Earth as our battery. And we're all very fortunate on the planet. The Earth is the best battery of all. And you can use the Earth to store and exchange heat and cooling. Just a few feet beneath the surface of the Earth, the temperature is always constant. So it works like a refrigerator, that you can dump heat into the Earth and bring cooling energy out of the Earth, or in a day like today, dump coolness into the Earth and bring heating energy out of the Earth.
And when you bring heating energy out, are you also using that to generate electricity, or is this just part of the heating and cooling?
It's just part of the heating and
Right,
the
okay.
cooling. We also use a technology that was actually invented in Roman times called an earth labyrinth, where you have a dense mass between the building and the ground, and this mass helps to also establish cooling. You could see in the video here how every part of the building is interactable with all the people who work there. One of the cool things that we do in this building, Tom, is we have our computational laboratory for in silico molecular biology, where we will be able to run complete clinical trials all in silico in a computer. And so you could do awesome things there that require lots of electricity, and at the same time you could do this with a zero carbon footprint.
So where's the actual electricity to power all the computers coming from? That's from
Yeah, that's from the PV, from
Okay.
the photovoltaics, from the solar energy.
And you really can generate enough for a building like this with lots of people working in it, lots of big computers. You can get enough from solar.
Oh yes, very much so. In fact, the electricity is the biggest use of electricity is to circulate the fluids for the heating and cooling between the 50 wells that we have built underneath the building, narrow bore wells. So circling that fluid throughout the 7 stories of the building is what uses the most of the electricity.
Okay, so I think that's
So we can all do this today, and I hope many, many architects are visiting this building. It's called the Unisphere.
Right.
It's in Silver Spring, Maryland, and I hope we can lead by example to encourage everybody to live a zero carbon footprint life.
Now, this is great if you're building a new building. You can use all these new technologies, but if we have a lot of buildings in the world already, how practical is it to retrofit this kind of technology? Because, I live in an old Victorian house, and, the walls just leak heat out everywhere. I could get a heat pump, apparently, but,
Yes,
are there
I think
problems
first
with
of all you can insulate your building, which would be a very good start, and secondly with a heat pump, as you point out, you can buy into wind energy. So there are many different things that you could do. The point is, if we started even just with all new construction being zero carbon footprint, we would be able to achieve the goals that are associated with what we call the Green New Deal in the United States.
Right. Okay, so we've got this idea that climate change has been caused by, roughly, buildings, agriculture, transport.
Yes.
Agriculture, there's various things people are working on. Eating less beef seems to be a big part of it. We've got this sudden enthusiasm for the plant-based meats. In the, Burger King is selling them. I don't know if that's going to go anywhere because but I think it's a very optimistic sign.
Oh no, it will definitely go somewhere. There was just a initial public offering of
Beyond Meat, yeah.
Beyond Meat, and I've seen advertisements where they came to Canada because Canadians love to eat beef, and
I just saw an ad for it on the way
Right.
here. Yeah.
So the Canadians they eat the Beyond Meat, and then afterwards they ask them, what they didn't know it was Beyond Meat.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
like a double-blinded, placebo-controlled trial, and they asked the Canadians, "How do you like this beef?" They went to Alberta and Saskatchewan, and they said, "This is the best beef I've ever had," and then it turned out it was Beyond Meat.
Yeah, so I've had the Beyond Meat burger. It is extremely good, but I think we should remember that in the developing world, consumption of meat is going up very rapidly. As people get richer, they want to eat more meat, and actually a lot of people have been undernourished for a long time. So I think we need to remember that if a few people in the developed world are eating slightly slightly less meat, that the global picture is still an increase in meat production. But there are things we can do about, changing the feed of cows and so on. So let's get on to transport. I think, electric cars, you see them on the streets, that's starting to become a thing. But what about other kinds of transport? Ships and planes account for a disproportionate part of the footprint. This is another area where you've been taking a pioneering role. So tell us about the role of electricity in flight, because basically, is that even possible? I mean, aren't the batteries a bit, you can fly for 2 minutes and then it's all over?
No, Tom, it's actually a lot better than that. So first of all, aviation accounts for about 5% of the CO2 footprint of the world right now, but it's scheduled to grow to about 9% over the next 20 years. So it's a big contribution. However, people have demonstrated that lithium-ion batteries and other forms of electric power storage can power aviation. Here you see a photograph just last year. My team and I, we won the Guinness Book of World Records for the longest flight in a completely electric-powered helicopter. You see the electric-powered helicopter there. We traveled for a half hour, 30 miles, and it's set a world record. By next year, that will be doubled. Airbus and Boeing all have very active, what's called e-aviation, electric aviation programs. So it was funny when I heard about this Green New Deal and they said, well, we'll have to start using trains more instead of flying. As a pilot, I was like, yikes, I love flying and I know that you can fly electrically. In fact, I believe that aviation will lead the way and aviation will be all electric before ground transportation will be.
Isn't there a big problem with the power-to-weight ratio here? That the batteries...
Not really. All because with what you have with electric aviation is you're replacing gasoline, actually Jet A fuel, with batteries. So there's a very well-known metric in aviation that about 40% of the weight of any aircraft is the fuel source. And it turns out that the fuel source for batteries replaces 1-to-1 of the fuel source of Jet A. Jet A fuel weighs about 7 pounds per gallon. And obviously you need thousands of gallons of fuel. So that's, 7 times thousands of gallons worth of poundage. And instead that can be replaced with the nice lithium-ion batteries that Elon Musk pioneered for Tesla. And now, China, speaking of the developing countries, China is the largest market for electric cars today.
So if you look at the kinds of things that Boeing and Airbus are doing here, I mean, I think there are sort of, when it comes to planes rather than helicopters, there are Cessna-style, size planes that can fly for, I don't know, maybe half an hour.
Well, JetBlue has announced that by 2040, they expect half of their long-distance flight carrying lots and lots of passengers, what are called regional jets, to in fact be battery-powered.
So you think we could get to a sort of 737 size plane?
Absolutely. It's actually easier with aviation than with ground transportation because with aviation you have this magical force called lift. Just the shape of the airplane's wing does a lot of the work for you.
And we just saw your helicopter there. In China, a lot of work is being done, actually in this part of the world too, on flying electric vehicles that are more like passenger drones than electric helicopters.
Yes.
What do you think about, are they sort of competing models? I mean, the people are talking about these flying cars that are basically drones that people sit in.
Yes, Tom, we are very active in that as well, and we are a major shareholder in a company called eHang, which has been pioneering.
Yeah, God, it looks like Blade Runner, that video, where
exactly.
this thing is flying around. Yeah.
So it's very important to us because one of our activities at United Therapeutics is we manufacture organs. Right now we're manufacturing lungs. Within a couple years we'll be manufacturing kidneys. And there are 1 million people in North America each year who die of end-stage lung disease and end-stage heart disease and kidney disease, liver disease. So if all of these people who are currently dying had their lives extended with manufactured organs, which I'm confident is part of tomorrow that we're working on today, then there would be a vast increase in the number of helicopters and planes needed to deliver all of these organs. One thing that I don't think you're going to see tomorrow is organs on the grocery store shelf that you go in to, pick them off.
Right, okay.
So we have to deliver them in real time. And these eHang drones and the other, what are called eVTOL, electric vertical takeoff and landing, also called flying cars, these are going to be ubiquitous within the next 2 or 3 decades.
Right. Okay, now if you think this sounds crazy, the idea of like we'll get our radio from a satellite in the car sounded crazy.
Absolutely.
When you proposed
And
that.
the idea of saving our daughter sounded
Yeah.
crazy. There was, no companies were working on it. It was one of the hardest diseases to cure. It was called the mystery of cardiology. And today there are tens of thousands of people living healthy lives with pulmonary arterial hypertension who would have otherwise been dead. And perhaps best of all, our own daughter is now over 30 years old and living a great life.
That's fantastic. Okay, before we move on from climate, yay. Before we move on from climate, I think the other area of this is, do we need to rethink our attitude to nuclear power?
I'm not an expert in that field.
But do you favour the idea that it might be part of the answer, or do you think we can get there with the PV and the wind power and the geothermal? Is that going to be enough?
I do believe it will be enough. What I don't know is if we'll have the willpower throughout all the different political systems in the world to make it enough. To me, if it was a choice between all wind power and everything else, I would go with the wind and the solar power, and I know that we could close the loop and have a zero carbon ecosystem for the world. But if it was a choice between climate change and having nuclear power in the mix, I would rather have nuclear power in the mix.
Okay, and then finally, let's move on to AI now. So I understand that your green building is also a very smart building. So the example that I'm familiar with is that I think Google uses machine learning in its data centers to reduce the energy footprint.
Yes.
Because it can kind of predict when it needs to turn the cooling on and the heating on and all that kind of stuff. And they say they've reduced energy consumption by 40%. Now that's just in a data center where you've just got a bunch of computers. So if you've got an office building with people and machines and so on, what does a smart building look like there, and how can AI help you control the energy consumption?
So it's really interesting because the very first example that people in the field of cybernetics and kind of precursors to artificial intelligence would use to talk about machine intelligence was the thermostat. And it's so simple and stupid, but I mean, think about it, it's pretty smart, because when the room gets too warm, the thermostat sends a message to the boiler, stop sending heat, and vice versa. So what we've done is really just kind of, had a self-replicating process on the thermostat. So the hallways know when people are walking down the hallways. The building knows how many people are in any different parts of the building. And the building also knows what the temperature is outside. When it's nice outside, the windows open up automatically. We do believe in individual autonomy over AI. So if any given individual wants to overrule the AI and close their window or open their window, everybody is free to do that.
Okay.
So personal freedom first.
Okay, but it sounds like, though, if you're monitoring like where people are in the building and they're walking around, is that, do people find that?
No, it's very easy.
Or is it just motion sensors?
Yeah, it's like, you've, I'm sure, played with Wii and whatnot, and, as you walk on it, it knows how you're walking, how fast you're walking. So because we built the building from scratch, we could embed intelligence throughout the entire building.
Right.
AI it's a great tool. Many people are afraid of it and think that you're going to have Terminator robots and the building's going to lock us all in. But, that once you built that kind of a building, no one would ever buy a building from that builder again. So I always say that there is no market for evil AI.
Well, no, actually, I've got to the point where you start typing something on your computer and you're kind of disappointed if it doesn't guess what you want. And
Well, Ray Kurzweil and Google, they're working on it. They're making it better all the time.
Yeah, well, exactly. You Google Gmail, it starts to guess what the rest of your sentence is, and a lot of the time it's right. You just go, oh, okay, I'll say that. Where else do you think AI is going to have the most impact? Because I mean, assuming the robots don't come and kill us all, where do you think it's going to have the biggest impact?
I think AI will have the greatest impact in the fields of medicine and clinical trials. And what we're trying to do right now to develop, there are 7,000 different rare diseases. There are even more common diseases that affect more people. And right now, every time we do a clinical trial, we have to recruit thousands of patients. We have to give half of them a placebo, half of them an active drug. It takes years to do this, and yet more years to discern the results, get regulatory approval. So with AI, what we can do is we can digitally simulate any given part of the human body and within the next decade, digitally simulate the entire body. Not the mind, just the physiological functioning of the entire body.
This is modeling the impact of drugs, specific molecules, and so on.
Exactly. This is doing like what people are doing for the weather system, but for our entire body.
Simulation. That's not AI, but I do understand that there are people who are very optimistic about the use of machine learning as a sort of accelerant for scientific research. So that's the kind of thing you're talking about.
Exactly, because then we can digitally insert a molecule. It's a digital replica of the molecule, and we can see within a second exactly what that molecule does in the day, because we can run the computer at thousands of times the rate that a normal physiology would run. And this may sound like science fiction, but I'm confident it's not. Within the next 10, 20 years, we will be able to do an entire clinical trial in one day that would have otherwise taken thousands of patients over 10 or 20 years. So there'll just be a renaissance of new treatments and new medicines coming out.
I hope you're right. The current, the usual old saw is it takes, 10 years and $1 billion, or maybe 15 years and $1 billion to get a new drug to market.
Yeah, AI will be the biggest disruptive force in the clinical trial and pharmaceutical area. That 10 years and $1 billion will come down to one day and maybe $1 million of computer runtime.
I hope you're right. And even if it's not quite as radical as that, that would still be a massive step forward over the very, very slow processes we have today. Now, you briefly mentioned there that this is not the same as simulating a mind, but obviously that is something else that you're interested in. You're interested in this idea of whether we might be able to do mind uploading and so on. And I have to say, this is one of those things I always thought was a bit crazy. But the more you think about it, Google is it's got all those emails I've written. It's starting to guess what I would write in an email. I could totally imagine 5 years from now, Google could have a system where you could have a conversation with me, and it's not me, it's just based on my answers, based on all the emails and texts and everything I've sent. Is that the kind of thing?
Well, I would say that's still you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's still you.
So I can live on after my death, and you can ask me things, and is that the
We
idea?
all think that we are the same we are right now all the time, but it's just not true. There was a famous scientist named Ebbinghaus who over 100 years ago showed that a month afterwards, we forget 80% of what happened to us during the preceding month. And it just continues like that. So we change day to day. You're not the same person you were as a teenager or as a kid. Before you go to college and after you go to college, you're completely different people. So we are kind of like a cloud entity. And while our body stops at our skin, the skin is not a boundary to our mind, and our mind goes past that. So if you have a digital doppelganger that represents even 80% of you as you are right now, that's still you. And in the future, people will think it was very silly that us folks in the year 2019, we thought there was just one static version of us, just like we think it's very silly that people 100 years ago couldn't conceive that you could just phone up somebody or text somebody from around the world. People later on in this century will say, well, of course, there's a physical embodiment of you, there's a virtual embodiment of you. If you come meet me someplace, just come virtually, and it'll be your same mind.
And how do I then reintegrate my conversation with you, my virtual conversation?
There'll be like a little logo that's like an arrow, syncing arrow.
Okay.
And you don't even have to press it, you'll just sync.
Actually, there's somebody here from DARPA who I met yesterday who's working on brain-computer interfaces. So this is something where there's a lot of work being done.
It used to be that plastics was the most important word, and the word in the future, sync, will be the most important word.
Syncing your brains, your various brains. Now, you mentioned a cloud-like entity there, so let's look at our own cloud-like entity here. We've got the word cloud of all the things that people have suggested is the biggest challenge that we face. So what do we see? We see climate, we see inequality, education, apathy, waste. Those seem to be the biggest ones. I'm not sure technology can do much about inequality. People are worried about AI bias.
Oh, technology does everything about inequality. Are you
Doesn't
kidding?
it make it worse?
Tom, that was the most, I think, inaccurate thing that you said.
Okay, go on then.
Technology has done more to level inequality than anything in the 100,000 years of Homo sapiens existence. I mean, we now have 4/5 of the world's population has access to all of the world's knowledge. I mean, that's huge.
Yep.
That's incredible. Today, 100 years ago, Rothschild, who was like the richest person in the 1800s, he died of an infection that today can be cured for 1 cent, is on the list of essential medicines in every part of the world. Technology is the greatest equalizer and democratizer that humanity has ever come up with.
So I'm normally I'm on board with that, but technology hasn't had a very good last few years when it comes to inequality and democracy. So we've had, meddling in elections as a result of technology platforms that didn't exist before, so that couldn't have happened.
So are you saying that elections weren't meddled with before social media?
It's just easier to meddle.
Oh my God!
It's easier to meddle with from far away. But
how did Nixon get elected?
Okay.
How did all these other fools get elected?
I'm sorry, I'm going to continue down this devil's advocate path a little bit further, which is, isn't it weird that the richest part of the richest country in the world, where at the center of the world tech industry, also has this massive problem with homelessness, and there seems to be growing inequality in. I mean, I can't remember some ridiculous percentage. It's like 15% of people in San Francisco are billionaires. So doesn't this sort of no holds barred technological capitalism, doesn't it seem to be increasing inequality? A lot of people are worried that it is.
Yeah, it's actually decreasing inequality, and definitely there are homeless people now. There were more homeless people in the 20th century, and even more homeless people with no heating, with no indoor plumbing, with no nothing in the 18th century. So I'm not trying to say that we have a utopia now by any stretch of the imagination, but we're getting closer to it all the time. And people fret about things like, the Russians interfering in elections with social media, but shortwave radio, that was developed 100 years ago, and people were listening to it then. Social media is just the modern form of shortwave radio.
I am a believer in the idea. Yes, radio did certainly start off as a social medium. You had a sort of chat room in every city. You had to learn Morse code to do
exactly.
it. But yeah, but people forget that when radio was invented, every radio set was a transmitter and a receiver.
And before that, when Gutenberg developed the printing press, within about 50 years after that, you had the 100 Years' War, because suddenly everybody could publish radical ideas, whereas before...
You get the Reformation and Martin Luther. He was a genius at social media.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, I agree with you on all of that, at least. Let's finish by talking about medicine in particular. So you briefly mentioned this, you casually said, oh, by the way, we're manufacturing organs. So how on earth does that work? Are you printing them? Are you growing them?
Well, let me show you this image that we have up here of one of the lungs that we're manufacturing. And it's a remarkable technology, Tom, and being based here in Canada for the C2 conference, I'm very proud to say that this lung manufacturing technology was invented by Dr. Shaf Keshavji at Toronto General Hospital, which interestingly enough was the first place in the world to do a lung transplant and a double lung transplant. The lung is the hardest of those major organs to transplant. It took 15 years after the first heart transplant to come up with the first lung transplant. But what we found out is that 90% of the people who need a lung transplant aren't getting them. They're dying on the waiting list, or they're not even being put on the waiting list. And yet, more than half of all Americans and Canadians agreed to donate their organs upon their death. So why is there this mismatch? It turns out that over 80% of donors whose kidneys are used have their lungs thrown away. And the reason for that is that the lung is a very fragile organ, and as soon as the kidneys are taken out, 80% of the time the lungs become useless. So Dr. Keshavji, and then we went ahead and industrialized, commercialized this technology, said we could take the lung out of the body. It's dead. It's on its way to biowaste. Instead, we'll build an artificial body, which is a glass dome, and we'll treat the lung like a patient. We'll infuse it with all the nutrients that it needs, and over a period of several hours, our technicians, in more than half the instances, are able to restore what was a dead piece of flesh to a vibrant, living lung, show it on a high-speed video network to transplant surgeons everywhere in North America. They then claim that lung like they used to claim it from a decedent, and 100% of the patients who have received our manufactured lungs, which now number in the hundreds, have all walked out of the hospital, gone on to live healthy, happy lives.
Fantastic. So you say manufactured, but this sounds more like a rejuvenation therapy. Aren't you taking so that seems to have implications for other therapies where I may not need a lung transplant, but maybe I'm getting old and my lung function isn't what it used to be. Does this also work as a treatment in living patients where you can rejuvenate people's lungs or other organs?
Yes, I believe it can. And for example, people who have lung cancer, One option is to remove their lung and put it in this artificial body that we use for the lung manufacturing, and then blast it with levels of chemotherapy and radiation that you would not want to do to the human body, eliminate the cancer, and then auto-transplant their own lung back into the individual. But talking about organ manufacturing, another fascinating form of organ manufacturing is that you could, I don't know if you call it rejuvenation, but we in our company, United Therapeutics, we've modified the genome of the pig and eliminated the antigens on the surfaces.
So you can take pig lungs and put them into humans. And
pig lungs, but the first organ that we're closest to doing that with is the pig kidney,
right.
And which is very important because there's over 100,000 people in North America waiting for a kidney on dialysis, and we have set numerous world records for survival in the animal models that we have to use before the FDA lets us into a person. But I'm very confident within the next couple of years, the first manufactured kidneys, in this case manufactured inside of a pig, will go into patients and save them from spending the rest of their life on dialysis.
Fantastic. Well, we've got only less than a minute left. I just wanted to ask you one more question. You seem to see great promise and great opportunity in all these areas. So you're optimistic, I take it, that tomorrow is going to be better than today.
I call it realistic because, in fact, tomorrow is going to be better than today, just like today is much better than last year.
Brilliant. Dr. Martin Rothblatt, thank you very much indeed. It's been fantastic. Thank you very much. After you.